Chapter 12. Tummy filled to capacity, Kessa stretched and looked around. Neither her sister, Pantheus, Rake, nor Artex were to be found. Having awoken late in the morning herself, she doubted the others had done likewise. She suspected it a meeting, and she'd been excluded yet again. Popping up from her seat, she hurried over to Artex's hut, bumping into Pantheus at the entrance. Teetering from the impact, Kessa tried to catch her balance. Pantheus gripped her arm, steadying her. "Just who I'm looking for," he declared gently, using his grip on her arm to leverage her into the crude structure. Upon entering the hut, Kessa immediately felt like she disturbed an inquisition and regretted her curiosity and feelings of exclusion. Aquestria sat at the table, her palms set firmly on the wooden surface, her posture and face rigid. Rake was lying on the cot, one arm folded over both eyes, one knee casually bent, while the fingers of his free hand drummed the bedside. Artex, arms crossed tightly against his chest, leaned against the wall, eyeing Kessa circumspectly. "What's going on?" Kessa asked guardedly, already guessing what was going on. They were going to ask her the question she could not answer. They were going to ask her why Cassius really wanted her dead. A vivid flashback careened through her mind, reeling her back to that fateful day when the events that would inevitably lead her here started. The summer sun shone brightly, the weather was gorgeous, and Kessa had recently celebrated her 14th birthday. Kessa didn't like to waste a beautiful day, and so she was indulging in this one, much like she did others, with a swim in the Iranian River. Hours slipped past like minutes as she reveled in the water, enjoying the peace of a solitary day. Her father had died 3 years ago, and they were living with Pantheus at his castle. Her 20-year-old sister, Aquestria, was currently working as a lieutenant with the Aquenian City Watch. Since Kessa was not otherwise occupied with any useful duties, she was, volunteered for a similar, if not as illustrious, position. While her training was at times fascinating, Kessa frequently ducked out to, as she put it, enjoy the overlooked pleasures of life, as she'd done today. It was too lovely a day to spend it sweating in bulky, ungainly, cumbrous armor like some overtasked, underappreciated workhorse. Skin overly pruned and her stomach growling, Kessa exited the water and started to dry off. Spotting Aquestria and Pantheus marching toward her, a pair of somber, unimpressed sentinels, immediately dampened her mood. No doubt she was in for a hefty lecture on responsibility and devotion to duty. Aquestria must have brought Pantheus along to help cement her point. Appraising their faces, Kessa began to worry that the scolding would be quite lengthy and more turbulent than she'd originally anticipated. She glanced at the trees, tempted to run, but realizing a lecture from her sister could never really be avoided, she simply continued to pat her long hair dry. "Kessa!" "I know, Addie. I just wanted a quick dip, and I lost track of time. I'm sorry." "Oh, I'm not here about that." Aquestria's face stiffened as she considered her sister's apology. She deviated from the topic she'd actually come to discuss. "Kessa, you've been losing track of time a lot lately. If you want to be a soldier, you really have to—" Closing her eyes, Kessa tuned out, regretting saying anything at all, as she'd mistakenly derailed her sister and brought on an unprepared reprimand. Now she had no one to blame for the lengthy reproof but herself. If only she'd kept her mouth shut. "Aquestria," Pantheus interrupted in a tone that signaled a ceasefire. "Enough of that." Kessa glanced up, surprised he'd come to her defense. Their relationship had been strained ever since she'd pushed him in the Irenian River almost 8 years ago. His blue eyes assessed her darkly as a deep frown creased his forehead. The responsibility of ruling Aquina had given him the deportment of a man twice his age, but his figure and face were still that of a 17, almost 18-year-old. Discussing responsibility with Kessa is like discussing soberness with a drunk. Equestria glared at him. Pantheus, that's hardly helpful. It's our job to teach. You can't teach someone who isn't willing to learn, he replied sharply. She's not listening. Besides, she already knows better. Why else would she greet us with an apology? Equestria's lips closed into a thin line, and Kessa grimaced. I only hope she'll take better care in the capital. Kessa's brows furrowed. The capital? What do you mean? Pantheus displayed a piece of paper, which he held just a little too tightly. Your sister's been promoted to the Cyrenian Guard. They've asked her to report as soon as possible. She's worked hard and earned this commission. He smiled, but sadness haunted his features. We're moving to Cyrene? Kessa blurted incredulously, as a plethora of feelings flooded her. The color in Equestria's face drained. She appeared unsure of how to react to her sister's standing there stunned. Aren't you going to congratulate her? Fully understanding Pantheus's admonishing look, Kessa blushed. She was the gloomy cloud in her sister's sunny sky. Of course! I always expected this, Kessa recovered with confidence. Equestria is far too talented to remain an Aquinian lieutenant for long. Congratulations, sis. I'm so proud of you. Now that we're off to the capital, it won't be long before you're promoted to the Euriate. Beaming, Equestria guffawed. Not likely. Only the elite of the elite make it to the Euriate. Like I said, not long, Kessa grinned. Although excited her sister had received such an honor, Kessa couldn't quite adjust to the fact that they'd have to move. She glanced at Pantheus again, standing there regally, the epitome of gallantry, and felt her knees go weak. The thought of leaving Aquina, the Irenian, or Pantheus had never been seriously considered. Are you sure you're all right with going, Kessa? If you're not, we'll stay, you know. Really? Of course, Equestria said reproachfully. I'd never force you to leave. And jeopardize your career, your dreams? Kessa would never want you to do that, Pantheus said, fairly glaring at Kessa. Would you, Kessie? No, she admitted slowly. And since Equestria has declared she'll not leave without you, there's no other choice. Gesturing in the direction of the castle, Pantheus said, We need to get back so you can pack. Eyes widening, Kessa questioned, Why? When are we leaving? In the morning, Equestria answered quickly, already walking up the bank. That soon? Kessa cried. These. They asked her to report as soon as possible, Pantheus said soberly. He hung back, waiting for Kessa to recover from her astonishment. Then they walked towards the castle, side by side, in silence. The stars gleamed like pearl-tipped pins embedded in a black velvet cushion, as Kessa brushed a dapple-gray mare named Celeste. Tears streamed down her face at the thought of leaving her behind. She found their long rides together very therapeutic. She loved the horse. Sniffing, she rested her head against the mare's neck, whispering words of affection. Hearing approaching footsteps, and assuming they belonged to Equestria, Kessa quickly wiped her eyes and nose. Revealing any grief would certainly tarnish her sister's resolve and giddiness. You should get some sleep. You've got a 2.5-day journey ahead of you. Pantheus advised, coming up beside her and patting Celeste warmly. "Are you ready to—" His features stiffened when he got a better look at her, and he stopped speaking at once. Kessa knew instantly that despite her efforts to hide the fact, he'd noticed she'd been crying. Her face was likely red, blotchy, and tear-stained. Unable to bear the expression of what she perceived to be disapproval, she bent down, placing the brush back in the grooming bucket. "I'll miss her," Kessa said, her voice quivering with sorrow. "I don't see how," he countered casually. Sorrow was rapidly replaced with anger. "Easy for you to say. You're not leaving your home." Forcing herself to calm down, she added, "It's hard to leave everything you love, possibly forever." He brushed her hand with his fingertips, almost as if he determined to hold it, and then changed his mind. The touch was unexpected for Kessa, and so was the electric charge that resulted. Any expressed affection between them had been practically non-existent since the river incident. "I meant you'll be taking her with you," he clarified softly. "Taking her with me?" she repeated listlessly, still distracted by her body's reaction to his touch. "Yes. Equestria's summons was urgent, and Cyrene is a 2.5-day journey, at a steady pace on horseback. Walking is out of the question, so I gifted 2 horses. Celeste whinnied, as if in agreement, and seemed happy at the prospect of going with Kessa. "Thank you, Thais." "It's the least I could do. Now, go to bed. You're leaving well before dawn, you know. I'll put Celeste back in her stall. Good night." Heart pounding unexplainably, Kessa set about to leave, but movement was suddenly difficult, almost as if someone had poured sand into her boots. Pantheus was already leading the mare back to her stall, the moon lighting his way. "Thais." He turned. "Yes?" They stood several paces apart, facing each other in the bright moonlight. Pain, like she'd never known, churned Kessa's insides, making it impossible for her to speak. Celeste tossed her head and stomped the ground impatiently. Pantheus waited, his grip on the lead tensing visibly. I just wanted to thank you again," Kessa managed weakly, not sure why she'd called his name, or why she felt so incredibly raw. She'd lived in Cyrene before, after all. Responding with a nod, he led Celeste back to her stall. The sun hadn't yet greeted the sky when Equestria woke Kessa and urged her to bathe and dress quickly. After a short, too short in Kessa's mind, breakfast, they hurried out to the courtyard to meet Pantheus, who'd already prepared the horses. After a brief hug and exchange of farewells and good lucks, Equestria mounted her horse, leaving Pantheus facing her sister. Peering down at Kessa, who was standing next to Celeste and holding her reins rigidly, Equestria prodded her horse forward in order to give the two a bit of privacy. Frowning, Pantheus muttered something about a safe journey when Kessa unexpectedly threw her arms around him and drew him close. The embrace lasted several moments until Pantheus took a step back. "Best get going, Kessa," he said tightly. Her gut wrenched painfully, and she spun toward Celeste. "Goodbye, Thais," she whispered, hurt by his perceived rejection. Climbing into the saddle, she adjusted her left stirrup. "Stay out of trouble," he said, gently slapping Celeste's rear to get her moving. Once her horse reached the edge of the courtyard, Equestria waved to Pantheus and spurred her mare to a canter. Kessa spun in the saddle to look at him once more, before urging Celeste forward and cantering out of his sight. Cyrene, the grand capital city of Akara, was as majestic as it was old. Alphalo Sakara founded Cyrene after the Three Kingdoms Peace Treaty was signed. Cyrene was situated between the Anandril Forest and the vast mountain range of Dragon's Peak. Strategically, it was a perfect location for an empire's capital city. The strength of any invading army diminished either between the trees of the forest or bottlenecked on the main road. A siege was equally unfeasible, as Dragon's Peak was riddled with secret caves and tunnels, which were ideal for food and weapon storage, and, if need be, a quick, secure escape from the city. After 2 days of riding, the Decora sisters reached the city outskirts at about noon on the third day. Passing vast swaths of farmland and a couple tiny villages, they finally approached the city's main road, which slowly widened until the full majesty of Cyrene came into view. An enormous wall built with thick, dark gray rocks encircled the city and stood impenetrably between the girls and their destination. The rocks in the wall were flecked with quartz that glittered in the sunlight. Locals and visitors alike often referred to Cyrene as the Diamond City, and as Aquestria and Kessa admired the quartz glittering in the sunlight, it wasn't hard to see why. The sound their horses' hooves made altered from a steady clip-clop to a click-clack as the road changed from dirt to elaborate stonework. Eventually they reached the gate, which was flanked by 2 spiral towers and equipped with various defensive and offensive devices. Guards patrolled the top of the wall, the gate, and an impressive drawbridge that spanned a chasm not full of water, but of sharp, jagged rocks and wooden spikes. Since Cassius had assumed the throne, it was clear that the city's defenses, including its militia, had been vastly improved. "What's your business here?" the first guard demanded. He was a robust, middle-aged man with intelligent eyes, a stern, implacable demeanor, and gray hair speckled with white. His appearance was amusingly similar to the city walls. Aquestria withdrew her identification and the orders and handed them over. The guard's posture relaxed visibly, but his scrutiny did not. He stared at Aquestria for some time prior to switching his visual interrogation to Kessa. "Her business here?" "She's my sister." "These orders are for Aquestria Decora alone." "To join the guard, not to come to the city, sir," Aquestria said with a sweet smile, adding, "It'll be my great honor to join a guard that maintains even an iota of the persistence, diligence, discipline, and devotion you've displayed thus far." He snorted, not quite concealing an upward twitch at one corner of his mouth. "I suppose it's an honor to welcome the daughters of Aduard Decora to the Diamond City." He paused for effect. "But not to the Cyrenian Guard. That welcome is earned. Our job is not for the faint-hearted." He bristled, glancing at the papers one more time before handing them back. "And yet, these orders come from Lord Fane himself. A rarity. Perhaps you'll be a great asset to us, Miss Decora. Perhaps not. We will see. Proceed," he said, waving to his counterparts that permission for the girls to enter was granted. Replacing the papers in her saddlebag, Aquestria inclined her head at the man and continued toward the front gate. Kessa gave the guard a long look, as though she were debating whether or not to approve of him. Eventually, he gestured for her to follow her sister, which she did. The girls had been to Cyrene before, and yet every time they passed through the gate, a sense of awe and wonder overcame them. The city was impressive in every way. The houses and shops were huge and well-maintained. Even in difficult and destitute times, Cyrenians took pride in their city. A high-functioning sewer system and a rigorously enforced policy against throwing one's garbage into the street kept the city clean, and rows upon rows of flower beds kept it smelling good, too. Large, majestic trees of various types brought a dash of nature to the city, especially when coupled with grass lawns, extensive parks, and the general encouragement of plant growth throughout. Cyrene, Athalos' eldest daughter, had loved nature, and it showed in the structure and planning of the city named for her. West of the massive gate was a stable with a row of roofed stalls and a barn constructed of wood and stone. The building was dwarfed by the city wall, which loomed in the background. City heralds boarded their horses there, and visitors could choose to lodge their horses there also. About a 10-minute hike northeast of the gate was the barracks, a colossal, imposing structure built with huge stone blocks, framed with heavy oak beams. As the headquarters of the Cyrenian Guard, it was designed to complement its occupants, representing their strength, durability, and power. Even more menacing was the knowledge that the Akarn dungeon, an infamous place, housing hundreds of Akara's most dangerous and reviled criminals, was located in the basement. Boasting 4 underground levels, each more harrowing than the previous, the dungeon had but one exit, the front door of the barracks. In order to escape, you would have to dare each level, pass several of the most highly trained soldiers in the kingdom, make it through that one exit door, and then negotiate a street mobbed with people whose main interest was to ensure you stayed in prison. Little wonder escape from the dungeon was rare. Even if one was clever enough to escape the dreadful place, they then coped with a worse nightmare: the subsequent pursuit of the dungeon keeper. Rumors and tales of the dungeon keeper were colorful and varied, but it was commonly accepted that he did not take kindly to people escaping his dungeon. In fact, he took it rather personally. When it came to thieves, murderers, and ne'er-do-wells, the popular idiom stated that it was far better to perish in the dungeon than to be hunted by its keeper. As a result, crime of any sort was basically non-existent in the city center. Appraising the barracks in the distance warily, Aquestria turned to her younger sister to ascertain her perception on the matter of what to do next. Raising an eyebrow, Kessa looked away, secretly wondering what she was supposed to do, while her big sis enlisted. Twiddle her thumbs. Like the gate guard had said, she wasn't invited to join the Cyrenian Guard, not that she'd wanted to. Glancing toward the barracks again, Aquestria almost involuntarily dismounted at the sight of a man standing directly next to her horse. He held the horse's muzzle in one palm. Evidently, he'd just given her a carrot or apple to munch, and lightly stroked her nose with the other. His expression gave no indication that he was the least bit apologetic or surprised that he'd startled the rider. Similarly shocked by the stranger's unexpected and sudden appearance, Kessa sidled Celeste forward protectively and glared daggers at the man. Aquestria took longer to recover her senses for 2 reasons. 1, she could count on one hand the number of people who'd managed to sneak up on her, and 2, she found herself extremely attracted to him. The sheer intensity of the feeling was foreign to her. Sure, she'd appreciated members of the opposite sex before, but never like this. She'd been betrothed once to Willamon Agion, Pantheus' older brother. Although young, she took the betrothal seriously, devoting herself to him and him alone. After he perished in the war, her heart froze, and although many men had attempted to warm it, she had no interest in pursuing a relationship with any of them. She prepared for a career in the military instead, focusing solely on developing her combat skills and physical prowess. Flawless discipline and devotion drove her forward, leaving little room for distractions like attraction or affection. Love, passion, and desire had all been frozen in a dome of thick, unyielding ice. Now, that dome of ice was cracking with the beat of her heart, which was suddenly pounding as if she'd just sprinted a marathon. With tremendous effort, Equestria suppressed her unexpected emotional and physical response and assessed the man professionally. Certainly his deportment, muscular physique, and leather armor marked him as an individual of military significance, but there was a mysterious aura or semblance of power that somehow demanded respect and was likely the sole reason Kessa kept quiet. Ordinarily, Kessa would have already ground into him like a mortar and pestle, crushing him with unsolicited censure and peppering him with questions. "Finished your evaluation, are you?" he asked serenely, his attention on the horse unwavering. "Your conclusion?" Equestria's eyes narrowed resolutely. "That Lord Fane, I presume, is very fond of horses." "The dungeon keeper?" Kessa gasped, intuitively backing Celeste up. Even in Aquina, they'd heard of Lord Fane, Cyrene's formidable dungeon keeper. "Fond of horses, indeed," Meles whispered, a smile hedging his lips. "Well done, Miss Decora. Just Fane, though. Omit Lord." He offered his hand to help her dismount. "Come, your training begins." Stopping mid-sentence, he glanced at Kessa, still sitting atop Celeste, her mouth slightly agape. "I suppose your sister will need accommodations?" "Is that a problem, sir?" "More a distraction." Equestria's brow furrowed. "The men?" "No, you." Fane signaled toward the entrance stables, where a boy stood in the doorway watching them. Leaning the pitchfork he was holding against the door frame, the boy ran over to them. Sweeping his shaggy, ash-brown hair back from his face, he smiled affably. "Quinn, this is Kessa Decora." Kessa, surprised the dungeon keeper knew her name, greeted Quinn as she dismounted. "Perhaps you could show her around. She can sleep in the stable's spare room until housing can be arranged. Maybe she'd be willing to help out as well. I apologize, Miss Decora." He spoke to Equestria. "I assumed your sister would stay with Lord Aguillon. Perhaps I should have requested this in my letter. No matter. Quinn will help her settle in and will care for the horses. Come." Equestria barely waved as she hastened to join Fane, who was moving at an alarming rate toward the barracks.